Welcome to Now in the 90s, where we look at the game releases of 30 years ago today. This week, an iconic platformer comes to the SNES, a cartoon game, sort of, and an obscure shooter for the Neo Geo. Hi, I'm your host, Jared, and today is December 2nd, 1992. Before we get started, we want to let you all know that Now in the 90s is getting its own YouTube channel. Thank you all for the love and support this show has gotten, making it possible for it to be its own thing. There's a link in the description to go subscribe now. And starting in January, all new episodes of Now in the 90s will exclusively be over there. Don't worry, you can still rewatch any old episode over there as well. So subscribe to it now to be one of the first. And thanks again for watching this show. Not all things are deserving of a video game tie-in. Some things get it anyway. Released this week in 1992 was The Incredible Crash Dummies for the Nintendo Game Boy. The Incredible Crash Dummies has you playing as the dummies, Slick and Spin, doing a series of stunts to earn money. This means jumping off a building and hitting as many things as you can on the way down. Then driving a car while intentionally smashing into things and the wall at the end, going skiing while crashing into things, preventing good dummy parts from going into the bomb baskets on a conveyor belt, to finally launching a rocket ship into space. The Incredible Crash Dummies video game is based on the line of the popular Incredible Crash Dummies action figures in early 1991 from Tyco Toys. The popular toy line was based on a series of National Highway Traffic Safety Administration commercials in the late 1980s.
Love your commercials, safety belts, right?
Where you going, man?
I like the little missus, she loves you guys. Just put seatbelts in my cab, nobody uses them. Guess they feel safe with me.
We'd had half a brain, we'd buckled up.
Hey, bumper breath, I do have half a brain.
You could learn a lot from a dummy. Buckle your safety belt.
For some reason, people loved those commercials and the toys, so they got expanded to more merchandising and a 3D animated cartoon series. I was one of those kids that loved the dummies. I watched the animated stuff. The toys were sweet, like that car you could crash over and over, and I had these oversized stuffed animals of them, only their arms, legs, and head were velcroed on so you could easily crash them, rip them apart, and put them together again. The Incredible Crash Dummies Game Boy game is one that I actually had as a kid. I played it tons and had more fun with it than you'd think. Look, as a young kid, any game that actively encourages you to break things is all kinds of fun. It also had some jamming tunes, as this was another game with music done by Greg and Tim Fallon, which also means that, yes, this game was published by LJN. Making its way onto the Super Nintendo this week in 1992 was Prince of Persia. Prince of Persia follows the story of an unnamed prince going through a series of dangerous traps, tunnels, and dungeons to rescue the princess from the evil Grand Vizier. The prince can run, jump, climb, and get into sword fights with enemies while solving puzzles, all within a time limit. Easier said than done, however, as there are numerous pitfalls and spike traps along the way. Prince of Persia was originally made for Apple II computers in 1989. It was also designed by Jordan Mechner, who also worked on Karateka, and much like Karateka, Prince of Persia uses rotoscope animation for highly detailed and realistic movement of the prince. In fact, the original Prince of Persia essentially created the cinematic platformer subgenre. The Super Nintendo version was different from the original release. The graphics were improved significantly, and the size of the levels were made bigger. In fact, it's longer overall. The home PC version had 12 levels and gave the player a time limit of 1 hour to get through all of them. The SNES version had 20 levels and extended the time limit to 2 hours. This game is no joke. It was difficult then and it's difficult now. As a kid, it was hard to understand the fluid motions and the controls because of that, and that's not to mention how some of the puzzles left my brain hurting. Prince of Persia received critical acclaim. People loved it, not just for the original release, but also for the Super Nintendo version as well. 90s British television series Bad Influence reviewed the game in their 10th episode, giving it 4 out of 5 stars. It would go on to get sequels with Prince of Persia 2 in 1993, Prince of Persia 3D, and then the popular reboot with Prince of Persia Sands of Time in 2003, with more sequels, reboots, and eventually a feature film. Did anyone ever see that? Arcade hits continue to make its way home, such as another release this week with Viewpoint for the Neo Geo AES. Viewpoint is a side-scrolling shoot-'em-up with an isometric view. Fly your spaceship left and right and blast everything that comes your way. You can get 2 little helper guys to help you shoot, charge your main cannon for a more powerful shot, and it even has some environmental hazards like needing to shoot a gear to open up a gate. And of course, there's some oversized bosses at the end of each level. Viewpoint is another one of those Neo Geo games that was released for the arcades and for the home console at around the same time. It's also got 2-player support, with each player taking turns. Interestingly, there is a simultaneous 2-player co-op mode, but it's disabled by default and can only be activated using the arcade's service menu. And since the home version doesn't have a service menu at all, this means the AES version doesn't have simultaneous 2-player mode at all. It's still awesome to play. It's a great shoot 'em up, and the sprite graphics look so good to this day. It reminds me a lot of Zaxxon. Also, if you've never heard it before, Viewpoint has one of the best soundtracks I've ever heard. Every song is upbeat and funky. I love it. As did many others. By early 1993, it was reported that Viewpoint was the 15th most popular arcade title of the time. Review outlets praised the home version as well. GamePro magazine awarded it with perfect 5s across all categories, and Electronic Gaming Monthly selected Viewpoint for 1992's Best Graphics and Best Sound awards. Viewpoint was ported to a couple of different systems. In 1994, it was ported to the Sega Genesis with mixed results. It looks and sounds good for a Sega game, but the abundant slowdown is painful. In 1995, it also got ported to the PlayStation 1, now with additional CG cutscenes and improved visuals. However, it still plays pretty slow and was made incredibly difficult. Though at least they made that funky future soundtrack sound even better. And for every other game released this week, here's Editor Dylan.
The other games released this week include Imperium on the SNES. It's a vertical shooter only with Gundams, but instead of a high score at the top left, you get experience points. Enough of these and you can level up your guns, which is refreshing compared to the usual find a floating letter to see what gun you get. Another SNES shooter released this week was Warp Speed. The cool thing about this one is that it's first person, which you didn't see a lot in 1992. The gameplay and visuals haven't held up all that well, but it was still impressive to see before we got the game changer that was Star Fox. Man, shooters were on the ball this week. You know what else was on the ball for the SNES? On the ball. Okay, look, not every segue can be a winner, but there's only so many ways you can spin a simple transition. Just like this game spins the world around you. Fucking nailed it. If you wanted to know what a full version of Sonic's bonus stages would be like, well, here it is. Last up on the SNES is Goal! I'm guessing it's a remake of the 1988 NES soccer game of the same name. But Dylan, I don't hear you ask. What if I don't want a remake of the same soccer game? I want a full-on sequel to soccer. Well, Toots, you're in luck because Goal! 2 came out for the NES this week. But how are the games? I mean, they're all still soccer. The last game released on the NES was The Terminator, based on the original 80s film. Interesting choice since the much more popular sequel to the movie released the previous year this game came out. But hey, I don't like to judge. Mint Day, the Game Boy released Centipede. If you don't know what Centipede is, well, it's a lot like Millipede. I hope that cleared everything up for you. The final Game Boy game released this week was Ren and Stimpy Space Cadet Adventures. It's got great sprite work during the cutscenes, but it's the type of platformer where you turn your thinking cap off and hold right. Every time you stop moving, jump. Every time you see something else move, press the attack button. Rinse, repeat, happy, happy, joy, joy. That leaves us with 11 games released on these 4 consoles this week in 1992. I'd like to thank everyone who supports this show and subscribes to the new channel. Hopefully it gains enough steam so we can continue to improve upon it and keep making something that we all enjoy. I'll see you there.
Thanks, Dylan. In the collector's corner, the Crash Dummies' value has crashed. A cart is only $8, and the complete one is only $48. Cheap for a Game Boy game. Prince of Persia isn't too much either, with it just being over $20 for the cartridge alone, and just under $50 for a complete copy. Viewpoint is this week's biggest value gainer. Being a Neo Geo game, it's naturally skyrocketed in price. The cartridge alone is right at $700, though a complete copy is only about $100 more than that. And that's it for today. Next week, real-time strategy, some more LucasArts adventure, and something dangerously cheesy. I'm your host, Jared, and this was Now in the 90s. Thank you so much for watching Now in the 90s. Please like the video and leave a comment down below and subscribe if you haven't already. If you're already a subscriber, thank you so much. Did anyone else play with the Incredible Crash Dummies toys as a kid? I can't be the only one. I remember I had a couple more of the figures too, like I had the purple guy where if you press the button on his chest, all of his limbs and his head would pop off. I loved those.